Now to the story of a sea monster with 130 razor-sharp teeth, the biting force of a T-Rex, and a skull measuring 2 meters.
In this video, we uncover why geologists just issued a red alert after shocking cracks were discovered beneath the Mississippi River. For centuries, this river has been the lifeline of America, but now fractures deep in its bed are raising fears of seismic unrest tied to the infamous New Madrid fault. Scientists warn these fissures are not natural erosion, but signals of hidden forces that could threaten bridges, levees, ecosystems, and entire river towns. Could the Mississippi, the backbone of America's heartland, be on the brink of a disaster no one saw coming?
For centuries, the Mississippi River has shaped the landscapes and livelihoods of America's heartland. Its depths have witnessed colossal floods, carried the weight of generations' ambitions, and defined the boundaries between wilderness and civilization. The river's ceaseless current masks a quiet power, its muddy waters threading through the heart of the continent, unchanging to the naked eye. Yet beneath that familiar surface, an invisible rift has begun to open. In recent months, something astonishing has stirred beneath the rolling expanse of water. Geologists, drilling deep into the layers of ancient silt and sediment, heard the whisper of an anomaly, an echo in the data, persistent and undeniable. Their core samples arrived laced with subtle fractures and linear breaks that defied prior expectations. These splintered lines, clear beneath the microscopes, were unlike anything attributed to normal river erosion or human activity. What happens when the foundation of a river so central to the land and life around it begins to fracture? And how might a hidden disruption, unseen by anyone above, spell threats not just for the river itself, but for the vast web of ecosystems, industries, and communities it sustains? Tonight, we journey into these hidden cracks, following the evidence, piece by piece, toward a disquieting truth lurking beneath the surface of the mighty Mississippi. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because the next crack in the Mississippi might carry consequences no one is ready for. A fault in the mud. From the outset, the story of these cracks is a tapestry woven of science, secrecy, and anxious discovery. The first clues drifted quietly into scientific journals and circulated in whispered conversations among survey teams. Seismic equipment, deployed along an otherwise unremarkable stretch of river, registered faint but unmistakable tremors deep below. The disturbances did not match any known patterns of barge traffic, mechanical works, or seasonal currents, pointing to a cause less visible and altogether more serious. It was a routine subsurface scan that yielded the first image, a clean, almost ruler-straight line bisecting the saturated mud beneath the riverbed. At first, it seemed nothing more than a data quirk, one of those oddities dismissed with a notation. But as more images followed, a pattern emerged. Linear fractures, too regular, too deep, and cutting through not just silt, but layers of hard-packed clay and gravel deposited over centuries. In the following months, the discoveries grew. Teams from multiple universities converged with conservation groups to triple-check every instrument, recalibrate sensors, and retrace every sample's chain of custody. The evidence was unambiguous. The cracks ran parallel, slicing through the sub-river strata in long, unbroken lines, some spanning hundreds of feet. At every location they checked, the fractures defied the water's currents overhead, traversing the underground as if following their own logic. These fissures were no surface feature. They began deep down, far beneath the swirling vortices and the dancing sunlight, and each appeared synchronized, hinting at coordinated movement in the earth itself. When the teams mapped the fractures onto regional seismic charts, a chill passed through every room, because running beneath the course of America's greatest river, they saw, was an ancient wound. the New Madrid seismic zone. For 2 centuries, that name has haunted anyone who studies earthquakes. And now, it seemed, the Mississippi's very bed was echoing with the warning tremors of the continent's past. But what could cause cracks to manifest now, in this time and place? And if the river's foundation is shifting, what dangers might soon surface without warning? The Red Alert. Days after the first full report, tension rippled through the Geological Survey's Regional Command Center. Every new data feed a possible bellwether. Scientists, conservationists, and emergency planners poured over the scans. All lines of inquiry led to the same verdict. The cracks matched none of the typical explanations. Not the slow gouge of water's flow. Not the seams left by decades of bridge construction. Nor any artifacts from dredging, pipelines, or industrial work. These were something older, something deeper, suggesting an awakening pressure far below. With reluctance, but certainty, the region's lead geologists issued a rare red alert public advisory. Beneath the river, they said, large cracks and fractures are appearing, forming deep linear breaches through sediment and clay. The alert was picked up by conservation organizations who just weeks before had declared the Mississippi River the most endangered river of 2025. Now, an ecological threat merged with a geological one, launching concern to a new level. What does a red alert mean for a river that rarely ceases to move? In the words of one fieldhead, it is an alarm not for what we've seen before, but for what may be coming. News spread quickly. Local agencies, tribal councils, and port authorities held closed-door meetings. The red alert triggered not only scientific urgency, but also a scramble for responsibility. Was any looming disaster a product of neglect, of natural forces, or, more chillingly, of uncertainties few had considered? As speculation circulated in the river towns, a different kind of investigation began, less concerned with the cracks' boundaries, and more with the questions they raised. If the river's bed is fracturing, could it rupture? Could even a modest stretch of the Mississippi alter flow, disrupt navigation, or pose local hazards? And could those living far from the river's banks remain untouched? The anatomy of a fracture. In laboratories and survey trailers along the levees, each sample from beneath the Mississippi told a story of pressure, resistance, and, suddenly, release. Fragments, forced through high-powered microscopes, revealed mineral structures sheared apart. Not simply eroded or worn, it was proof that what the geologists had found was the result of substantial pressure. Minerals had snapped, not crumbled. The cracks themselves seemed independent from the water above. Where ordinary riverbed fractures wander along a curve, these new fissures cut straight and deep, indifferent to the eddies and turns at the surface. Their paths aligned with the orientation of known subsurface stresses rather than with surface cues. Sample after sample confirmed the phenomenon. Thick bands of mud and sand punctuated by sharp dislocations, clean edges tracing out the dark paths of the fractures, lying parallel and persistent. Some sections showed small amounts of newly displaced clay, suggesting the fracturing was, at least in part, ongoing. Surface surveys by satellite and drone showed nothing amiss. No abrupt sinkholes, no visible warping of the river's path. Yet sensors, anchored to the riverbed itself, continued to register tiny rhythmic vibrations. For many local communities, scientific language turned quickly into public concern. If the base of the river was splitting, might the cracks propagate upward? Would water eventually widen them, threatening levees, bridges, or farmland abutting the banks? Nature is patient, but it is not always gentle. In the face of unnatural fracture, what part of the river's character might change first? And would any warning be enough? Echoes of New Madrid. Almost every geologist who studied the cracks was haunted by a single certainty. The past is never truly silent. The New Madrid seismic zone, lying beneath swathes of the Mississippi Valley, has brooded for generations, the site of some of the continent's most powerful earthquakes. It is a place where the earth shook so violently 2 centuries ago that the Mississippi temporarily reversed its flow. The newly discovered fractures mirrored in miniature the hidden scars of those ancient quakes. In reports and interviews, the experts hesitated to draw conclusions, but the fact remained: nothing about ordinary processes could explain parallel cracks cutting through such thick layers of riverbed in this area. For months after the tremors were first measured, scientists worked in teams, overlaying fracture maps with seismic histories. The similarities were striking: linear trends, orientations matching the stress fields of the region, and clusters where the river intersected with persistent, deep bedrock faults. Older river towns, those with archives and deep community memory, remembered tales of trembling ground and shifting sand. Records from the 1800s described church bells ringing unbidden, homes torn from their foundations, and whirlpools opening in the river. Now, modern equipment had returned the region's attention to stories that once seemed consigned to history. What worried scientific teams most was not the size or even the number of the cracks, but their potential. Established rules evaporated. If deep tectonic movements influenced the riverbed, the next change in the Mississippi story could be anything from subtle subsidence to dramatic instability. Are these deep fissures harbingers of a new seismic cycle, or do they represent an as yet unmeasured change within the land beneath America's mightiest river? A river on the edge. In the weeks following the red alert, monitoring stations sprouted up along the river's course. Floating platforms carried seismic detectors, and fiber optic sensors traced movement below the waterline. Every tremor was logged, time-stamped, and scrutinized. At the same time, environmental agencies raced to model possible impacts. If the cracks widened or shifted, could river flow change course, undermining levees, or washing out silt in unpredictable ways? What would be the consequences for critical infrastructure, from navigation channels to water supply systems and bridges? Conservation organizations, already on high alert, having declared the Mississippi as most endangered, pooled resources to map likely crisis zones. Reports identified bridges most at risk, considering everything from ground movement to shifts in sediment. Rumors circulated too. Some community members voiced concerns about legacy pollutants, mercury and arsenic, from historical industrial facilities or chemical spills. Would wider cracks allow buried contaminants to leach into the water? There was no concrete evidence to indicate massive releases, but the unease was palpable. Any strange color or scent in the water took on heightened significance. Nature, too, appeared unquiet. Anglers described unusual currents. Some riverside residents reported sensing slight vibrations in the soil, a gentle humming that defied easy explanation. In every conversation, one question repeated: if the very floor of the river is fracturing, what holds the system together? Countdown to change. As days turned into weeks, geologists refined their models and convened frequent meetings. Every shift in the seismic record generated discussion. Was water pressure building within the cracks? Or was the Earth's deeper crust flexing, inch by inch? Government and infrastructure planners took notice. Federal and state officials reviewed old emergency protocols, rehearsed responses to possible scenarios, and identified areas most in need of increased monitoring. Water quality checks multiplied at intake sites. Public communications remained measured, assurances that all known risks were under study, and that no immediate threat had been identified. But preparations advanced behind the scenes. Evacuation plans gained fresh scrutiny. Inspection teams prioritized high-risk locations along the river. Bridges, so central in river towns, so iconic as fixtures of community life, became a mainstay of town hall meetings. Engineers and geologists fielded challenging questions. Would a bridge collapse overnight? Could riverbed fractures affect foundations? The answers, at best, were provisional. Studies would continue. Vigilance would remain high. Even the most optimistic officials admitted that the situation, though stable for now, marked a new chapter in the river's history, a chapter defined by subtle, shifting uncertainty underfoot. Beneath the current, a web of trouble. With the spotlight on the riverbed, investigations widened. Every mile of infrastructure, bridges, piers, ports, came under review. Often, the greatest issues hid not in the visible waters, but in the aging, corroded underbellies of structures supporting commerce and daily life. Data showed an unsettling correlation. Places with pronounced or numerous cracks beneath the river sometimes overlapped with bridges exhibiting subtle, chronic strain, while authorities avoided drawing a direct link between fractures and ongoing structural problems. The coincidence warranted extra audits and, in a few cases, temporary rerouting of traffic. Bridge maintenance teams stepped up. Every seam, bolt, and support was checked for water damage, corrosion, or any minute sign of movement. Could a bridge lose its grip if the underlying sediment fractured too far down? Or would the intervening layers buffer the effect? For now, only vigilance could answer. Concerns extended to environmental vulnerability. Old rumors of chemical contamination from riverside plants resurfaced. Stories about Italco and others. Both mercury and arsenic had been found by environmental groups at various locations along the river, though not directly linked to fractures. However, the discovery of new pathways through the sediment raised uncomfortable possibilities. Would deeper or wider cracks increase the risk of legacy pollutants entering the water? No evidence tied the cracks themselves to a spike in contamination, but the possibility added urgency to monitoring efforts. A river connected. What happens in the Mississippi does not stay on its muddy banks. With every update, upstream and downstream communities braced for ripple effects. The river's network is a living system. Navigation, water supplies, fisheries, farms, and towns all linked by the steady flow of water. If the cracks compromised even a small segment of the riverbed, new patterns might emerge. Shifting channels, altered currents, grounded barges, silted passages. Impacts could be felt locally and downstream, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a slow disruption. Longer transport times, supply challenges, and shifting ecology. Those ecological stakes run deep. The Mississippi is a vital corridor for fish, birds, and other wildlife. If the cracks accelerate siltation or disrupt water levels, spawning grounds or migratory stopovers could vanish or transform overnight. Looming behind every consideration were memories of when, 2 centuries before, the New Madrid earthquakes made the river flow backward. While scientists did not expect a repeat, the reminder lingered. Transformation could come suddenly and with little warning. Meanwhile, people clung to routines, monitoring water levels, listening for news, and sharing stories, all forms of readiness when the ground itself feels uncertain. Watching the water. The river, outwardly, has shown little change. Barges move along their courses, birds circle overhead, and towns sleep to the steady rush of current. But beneath that familiar scene, the fractures persist. Monitoring crews kept their vigil. Each morning, new data told the ongoing story. Engineers continued to analyze microseismic records, while environmentalists sampled the water and planners refined protocols. Insurance, emergency response, and repair assessments. Conversations in river communities return time and again to the same uncertainties. Is the worst over, or has a new phase begun? When the river warns, does it do so with subtle signs, or without any warning at all? And what of the old legends that the Mississippi is a living force, unpredictable beneath a calm facade? As experts reminded residents, the greatest changes usually unfold quietly, until they cannot be ignored. Where things stand. By summer's height, the red alert persisted. Geologists released updated maps tracing the gradual extension of the cracks. None had closed, but for now, none threatened catastrophic failure. Most importantly, no spike in seismic activity or dramatic erosion had signaled imminent danger. Yet caution ruled, and the Mississippi retained its new title, the most endangered river of the year. Conservation groups amplified their calls for oversight, arguing that the cracks underline deeper vulnerabilities, a river integral to ecological balance and the nation's commerce, but ever at risk of both ancient and modern threats. Government agencies continued to study every available data point, whether this was a symptom of renewed tectonic restlessness or something new altogether remained open to inquiry. At briefings, officials attempted to reassure the public enhanced monitoring and improved communication would continue. Thanks to advances in engineering and environmental science, the hope was that any new risk and any potential disaster could be managed, or at least better predicted than in centuries past. Privately, though, concern ran deep. Could these cracks, silently advancing, signal a shift beyond what any generation had witnessed? Or might this be a call to deeper understanding of the river's evolving nature? Until next time, above the cracks, life goes on. River traffic persists, bridges endure, and communities adapt, much as they always have. The story of the Mississippi is unchanged in appearance, save for new awareness of the mystery below. As the red alert lingers, a sense of humility grows, an acknowledgement that under the appearance of strength, vulnerability endures. The river teaches a lesson plain and profound. Nothing is permanent, and the deepest currents are those unseen. If this story stirs discomfort or curiosity, stay vigilant and informed. The cracks beneath the Mississippi are more than lines in mud and clay. They are reminders that the unseen shapes the fate of the familiar. Share your questions, your river memories, and your concerns below, and always remember, what lies below may one day shape everything above, and history is written as often in silence as it is in storm. Until next time, stay aware and never take the ordinary for granted.